Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the newest edition of What's Occurred in episode 7. I want to welcome my comrade at arms. Hi, Jack. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Wayne, as always.
Jack's up in sunny Malvern with a cuppa, in a sunny conservatory. Me in my office, my tiny little office, with my map of the world behind me. But what we've also got, guys, is a special guest on this week's program. And it's Tracy Mountain, another fellow comrade in arms, and another Welshie from Cardiff. Hi, Tracy, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, Wyn. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Jackie.
You too as well, Tracy.
Yeah, great. Guys, what we're going to talk about this week, then, to have a little bit of a continual sort of format with the program, is we're going to talk, like we talked to our guests about the specialisms that they do and what things that they excel in and sort of as part of the sort of core crux of their business world. And Tracy's is about recruitment and selection from a perspective of an organisation. And having known Trace for a number of years now, I know this is a specialism because she trained me on one of her sessions the other week. I think it was about 2 weeks ago, Trace. And I come out of there thinking, I absolutely know nothing about recruitment selection before going into that. And I know it was enlightening. So I do appreciate your time.
You have my sympathies, Tracy. I'm having to put up with this guy.
I'll take that as another compliment. Just to follow on, and before we get into the questions, then I'm going to hand over to Jackie for question number 1. But we will, and we've said this on the commentary earlier, that we were going to record the before and during. And the before, I mean, is absolute carnage. The three of us have just chatting and giggling and laughing, and it was something like a Michael Parkinson's evening with Oliver Reed in 1979. Where so without any further ado, then Jack, if I hand over to you to ask Tracy question number 1.
Professional now, are we?
We are. We should say.
No reputational damage.
Right. Okay then, Tracy. I'm sure there's going to be lots of people eager to know, who are potentially looking for work right now, eager to know what it really takes to be a good interviewee. So I'm just going to throw that open question to you.
Absolutely. So I've been in recruitment and selection now for over 30 years. I know you're thinking, gosh, 30 years? Yeah, I've been recruiting for over 30 years. And I do it both internal of civil service, but also external in lots of financial institutes and other organisations. But it doesn't matter what organisation you go for an interview with. The interviewer wants you to be yourself. That's the big one. And also be aware of your own achievements, what you've done. Really think about those good things that you've done in the organisation you've worked for previously, and really try to bring those to the forefront, because they're your selling points. They're the things that we want to hear as an interviewer, and those things are important. And think about the things that motivate you as well, because I want somebody who's sitting in front of me that actually wants to work for me. And wants to work for the company as well. And that's really important. You get loads of people coming and sitting in front of you, and you just don't get that. You just get that person who just, why? So a typical question could be, why are you coming to work for this company? And they'll say, oh, well, it's close to home.
Yeah. That's making it all about them and their needs, isn't it? Rather than, as you said, really showing the enthusiasm to want to work for the company.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned about, being yourself, which I absolutely agree with. And I know nerves can take over. Wyn will know me well enough by now to know I usually share some sort of funny story, but it's not necessarily about myself this time. I was working for a company. I won't mention the organisation, but I was asked to scribe in an interview. And you know what it's like, you're trying to sort of, really actively listen, get down all the key points. And this particular candidate, who's actually applying for a trainer position, was asked a question, which is quite a typical question, around what would others say about you, or how would others describe you? And it's a common question, but usually quite a challenging one for people. Well, I was thinking, imagine this, I'm sat there now at the desk, sort of, you know, waiting, pause to write the response down. And I will sort of, you know, be polite with this version.
I think I know this.
That he said, if you asked my mum,
oh God,
she would call me an effing lazy bee.
oh.
So you can take being yourself.
Yeah.
But I was sat there thinking, do I write this down? The actual words that he said. I mean, that happens, good grief, it's probably going back about 15 years ago, but I've never forgotten it, because I just thought, what not to say?
There is a line, and I've had a very similar experience not so long ago, actually, where I asked, what do they do for a living? And she said, I wax ladies.
Oh God.
Oh no.
Yeah, was this before or after you shook her hand, just out of curiosity? Oh.
I don't shake hands, unfortunately, in interview anymore. It's a long time since. But yeah, so yes, there is a limit. There is a line. Yes, you're right, Jack. Here we go. I have a very similar experience. And you're going to go, okay. And you just, you know.
So, Trace, off the back of that, in terms of, you know, your body language, because I know you and I have worked with each other on a couple of on bits over the years.
Yeah.
And some obviously predominantly on the civil service stuff, and we talk about effective communication. We talk about managing, you know, and understanding body language and interpretation and things. So I got to be honest, I'm asking you both now, because you know, my experience of recruitment, and I can tell you, the last time. It was about 7 or 8 years ago, and the only thing I can remember about one of the interviews, and it was up in London, and it was a Friday night. I just wanted to get home, and when all I can remember is the lad in the interview just went off piste on everything. He just didn't listen. Came with the presentation. We said, you're only going to get questions. We're time sensitive. Don't bring a laptop. He brought a laptop. We don't want to see the presentation, but he still insisted on cracking on with it. And by then, you know, it had gone, and I was scribing on one of them. And one of the comments that I made, and I shared it with my co-facilitator at the end of it, was he had wonderful teeth. And he had really nice, but I can't remember anything about that, because they just didn't respond to it. But I was so conscious that my body language was going to come across as because I don't know what I was expecting. Don't show me the presentation. We don't want that. You've got 4 competency questions. Let's please just answer them. We can answer them. We can assess them, move on, and we let you know a couple of days' time, you know, going into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it was.
But when you need to be in control of that situation. If somebody goes off piste for me, I bring them back. Because you're actually doing them a disservice by allowing them to continue down the wrong road. Because at the end of that,
happened.
Yeah, and continually happened, and you do get candidates like that. But you know, you hopefully they'd learned after the first time. But obviously on this occasion, not the case. But
44 minutes, because we cut it, and in all honesty, I think I interjected at least 3 times, and my co-facilitator injected a couple of times, and I had to physically say, listen to the laptop, and I put my stuff down, grab the laptop, so I'm going to put that on one side now, because I've really got to bring you back on track.
Absolutely.
And I'm not one of these, you know, I'm not one of these people that won't speak up if I need to, as you both know.
No,
you know, both know me.
No, you don't say when.
It just got to the stage, but I was so conscious that what my body language was portraying, because obviously you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, effective recruitment is about giving the candidate, it's their slot, it's their time to tell you everything.
Absolutely.
And then, but I was like, oh, and I'm looking around the room thinking, are you not listening to what I'm saying?
But equally, I mean, because I always say about an interview is a two-way process. You know, it's about the interviewer getting a really good grasp of the interviewee and the other way around. But I'm sure we've all come across various examples. But whereas there can be good and bad interviewees, they can equally be good and bad interviewers.
Because you have to remember that most people don't do, especially in organisations, don't do that as their living, i.e. they don't do that for 37 or whatever hours a week. It's just an add-on, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're asking people to do a role, perhaps they don't have the skills in order to do it.
And there's no training for it.
No, exactly.
Well,
you know yourself generally, I do some interviewer training, and lots of organizations are starting to pick up on that, because it is so important. Because if you get the wrong person in the door that first day, it takes a huge amounts of time to get rid of them, and generally they don't get rid of them. What they do is they just move them on, and you're stuck with that individual 4 years. My friend owns a company in Cardiff, and it's the legacy effect, isn't it? She's still trying to move people on. I'm trying to say that in the nicest way. Moves people on because the previous manager didn't. Because he just chose to just ignore it. And that's what you're dealing with. It's that add-on cost, that longevity of actually trying to pay someone who is not doing a particularly good job. So recruitment is really important from day one. And we're asking people to do a job that perhaps they're not skilled at doing.
I think it's a really important point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, with our backgrounds and companies we've worked in, I've got no doubt we've all witnessed that.
Absolutely. I interviewed someone who fell asleep once.
Oh dear.
Next to me. I don't know whether that was me or whatever, but also the fact that, I also interviewed with somebody who does my job, a recruiter, somebody who deals with recruitment every day, who asked a candidate how old they were.
Wow.
Wow, it is wow.
I'm asking then, in terms of over and above, so when we look at the, when you go in with the CV, what would you say the best, with the different types of interviews there are, and how could you best use your CV on that? I mean, just talk about the different types of interviews as a start of a 10, but then sort of blend, coming off your CV, you're restricted to two pages because you want that level of impact. Now, my CV at the moment is sitting at about 4 pages, but it depends if... It depends. Oh, I know, but...
When you need to send it to either myself or Tracy, we'll sort you out.
Absolutely.
Okay. It wouldn't mind that one. Yeah, okay, you needed to get that one in there. Oh, my ribs, right, okay.
But yeah, there are lots of different types of interviews out there, and over the years I've done, strengths are becoming very much a focus. I'm sure both of you have heard about strength-based interviewing now, very much in the forefront of everybody's ideas, and I'll talk a little bit about that if you want me to in a minute. You've got the old competency-based interview, which is tell me, explain to me, describe to me a time.
Yeah.
So you're looking at past behavioural experience there. You've got behaviours, you've got strengths, as I said, or you've just got a complete ad hoc approach, which we've all seen as well. We're trying to get away from these types of questions where if you were an animal, what would you be? We're trying to step away from that.
I struggle with those type of random questions.
Yeah, and they are random, and I think that what you've got to remember as an employer or as a recruiter or a job vacancy holder, the questions that you're asking at interview, you have to be aware that there has to be a link to the job, to the role that the people are applying for, because that makes it easier for the interviewer when they can see that link.
Yeah, that makes
it easier for them to then respond in a way that's positive. Because at the end of the day, you don't want the best interviewee. You want the person who can do the job, if that makes sense. You don't want the person who can come in there and rattle off these perfect examples because they've used them so many times before. What you actually want to get is an idea of that individual and their motivations and their enthusiasms for the role. Yeah. I hope, I'm really enthusiastic about the job that I do. I hope that comes across to you today. And that's what you want to see in somebody. Because I don't want to be sitting next to someone for 37, 42 hours, whatever that may be, who comes in every morning. Here we go again.
And that's why I think you can't solely rely on just competency-based questions in an interview, because there are good interviewees that know those type of questions. They prepared their specific answers to it. They know that doesn't faze them, but you're not getting a sense of that person's true personality or motivation through those type of questions.
It's very one-dimensional. It's very one-dimensional with a.
Do you think there's a gut? Sorry, did you think there's an element of gut instinct comes into it as well, or do you think? No, Jack and I, big fans of emotional intelligence, and we've done a session on this, and we've both trained this with companies. And I did something similar on this because I did unconscious bias a small little bit. We talked a little bit of that relationship management, relationship awareness, and just that initial that initial sort of zap that you get with someone, and you have to sometimes run the gut instinct as opposed to what your social circle or your in and out crowd sort of perspective covers off. So
my body language telling you something.
I'll shut up and let you answer the question. And absolutely, go.
I think my answer to that would be that most things that we do have to be evidence-based, because your biases can have an impact when we all have those unconscious bias or conscious bias to a degree as well. So you've got, your conformity bias, your affiliation bias, you've got all those kinds of bias, your halo horns.
Did that this morning again.
Yeah, exactly. You've got all those bias. And also comparison bias, which is one of the worst things that you can use in recruitment and selection. The problem is and I'm going to say it, is you're probably very aware of what your biases are, and you probably question yourself on a regular basis. I have employed people that I don't particularly like. Yeah.
And I question, and then obviously because when this is released out, it'll be on YouTube and LinkedIn and other social media channels available as well. But I question, and I would challenge anybody to come back and tell me that they have never done that. Anybody that's been involved in that because relationship.
You're not recruiting your best friend, are you? You're not.
No, that's right. You want someone to work with.
This long-lasting, friendship with.
And I always ask the question, though, is how many times do you work with friends? How often, and how many friends? I'll rephrase that. In my 25-year career with Nationwide, I mean, I've walked away from that nearly 5 years ago now, but I've kept in touch with half a dozen, maybe the odd one or two more. A little bit on social media, but that I don't really class those as friends per se. I class those as people that I'm friendly with, and people that I was friendly with in my old world that I wouldn't class as friends. Does that make sense? Because
I think it's
two different things.
As an interviewer, I make a rule that I would never interview family, which is obviously first priority. But I wouldn't interview anybody that I would go out for a drink or a meal with either, in regards to being a friend, because I think you cross that line, and I think and I think you have to be aware of that. I think it's really important, because you're going to upset somebody. I would always recruit based on the evidence that I've seen on the day, be that in an interview, role play, or whatever that may be. And you could upset someone, so I think you have to be really careful. And I always look when I'm interviewing, so I'll be interviewing in the next couple of weeks, and what I will do is I very much look at the list of names, and if I recognize any of the names, I will step aside, because it's not the right thing to do. I think it's because you do have biases, because you might know them, you might have previously worked with them, and people do change, people do mature, they move on and things like that. So people you've worked with in Nationwide, win 25 years, they might be completely different in the way they work. They might be in the wrong job.
That complete open mind, don't they? And if you've got prior knowledge of somebody, whether that's good or bad,
put it to one side. Yeah.
I mean, what would you, for any sort of companies, particularly any managers in any organizations that might be listening to this, what would be your recommendations or your tips in terms of what would be the best approach to get the right person that's the right fit for the role? Not just relying on interviews, but any other sort of assessment centres. What would be your advice to really try and get it right?
I might burst a few people's bubbles saying this, but interviews in isolation are not a great predictor of future performance.
Yeah.
Sorry to say that. I'm really sorry. People think that they're just a 45-minute snapshot of someone, aren't they?
Yeah. Where somebody can be a very good actor or actress.
That's the downside of it. Yeah.
And that unfortunately is the case. So I think that people need to make. It starts very much from. It goes way back. Before you even start interviewing, it's making sure that the job description is a true resemblance of the role that they want that individual to do. And that's where you base, excuse me, your recruitment and selection process on, and making sure that you identify what you want from that individual. Is it what behaviors you want? If it's competencies, what competencies you want to use? If it's strengths, what are you looking for within that strength-based interview? And those are the important things. You know, there are so many different things that you can. I think interviews are important, though. Please don't get me wrong. I think they
not just.
Yeah, absolutely. They form part of a process. You're looking at role plays. I think, Jackie, we said about contact centres. You've got to get somebody, if you're working in a contact centre and you can't actually use, talk to people over the phone. Unfortunately, you're probably not, your skills are probably better utilised elsewhere.
And I think every call centre that I've worked in anywhere, and we're talking about large organisations, would absolutely do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I agree.
You've got presentations, you've got written exercises, excuse me, joking now. You've got lots of different things. You've got in-tray exercise, your ability test, personality test, all those types of things are out there, and they should be more utilised. They really should be. It's not just about that 45-minute. You are basing the next 5 or 10 years perhaps on a 45-minute interview.
Yeah. And there's irony about what you're saying there, Trace. I mean, it's the idealisms, and if it's set up in a good format. So, do you think, to conclude that part and move on to the next part, because I'm quite intrigued about this next question, but when you're going through this, do you think that they're rushed sometimes? Do you think the whole interview process is sometimes rushed by people going in? I'd gauge that. So following on then with that, what are the benefits, do you think, of an assessment centre then?
So I think there's loads of benefits from assessment centres, but there's loads of negatives as well. So I'll talk about both of those. The benefits are you generally see more than one assessor. So the unconscious bias, i.e. that you and I might not particularly get on, or you might not, I might not see in you what you really have. So you see lots of different assessors. You do lots of different activities as well. So you might not be great at interview, but you might be really good at the written part of it, or you might be really good at the presentation and things like that. And then it all comes together. And we have a debrief about it, and you can really have a chat. Oh, well, I saw this, what did you think? And it really comes out rather than just saying no or yes at the end of it. You can have a really good discussion with assessment centres, so it sees you in a whole new different light. The problem is when you run assessment centres, you put an advert out and you said the assessment centre will run on so and so. So it scares a lot of people as well, because they don't understand what's involved in an assessment centre. I always say, if there's an assessment centre, I go for it, because it just gives you the opportunity from an interviewee's perspective to sell yourselves in lots of different ways. It gives you the opportunity not to just stuff, if you feel that you stuffed up on an interview or something like that, it just gives you an opportunity to sell yourself in different ways. But
also as well, Tracy, you mentioned about the interviewee there, it gives them, I think, a better understanding of, is that the right job and the right company that they want to work in? Because I think probably 99% of of people have at some point found themselves accepting a job and within a few weeks deeply regretting it because they were so desperate to show their willingness to be the person for that job, but not taking the time to really think, is this the right environment for me? And I think assessment centres can give the interviewee a better perspective as well.
It does, and it also gives you, usually you have that 10-15 minute introduction and start talking about the company and talking about the roles that they're applying for, so it gives you a better insight. And you know, some people always say to me, have you ever had anybody walk out of an interview after you've given the introduction? And I said, yes, absolutely. And they say, what do you think of them? And I think it's a brave thing to do, because, you know,
this isn't right for me.
Yeah, it isn't right. And I'm quite happy.
I'm sure.
Pardon, sorry?
Sorry, I was saying a brave thing and the right thing.
And the right thing to do, because it might not be for them, which is why I'm so impressed with civil service, to be honest with you, because they've very much gone down the road of looking for not just past behavioural experience now. They're very much looking for those that potential of candidates, and they want people to only apply for roles that they really are motivated by and enthused by, and that's really important. And I hope lots of other companies start looking at that strength element, those, you know, that real motivation and enthusiasm for the role that they're applying for. Because Jackie, you're 100% right. I personally wouldn't want to be sitting. I'm not very good at finance. Win will probably think I'm not very good at it. It doesn't float my boat at all. The mere thought of sitting in a finance office for 37 hours a week just sends shivers down my spine.
I mean, yeah.
So I just want to do what I want, the things that motivate and enthuse me, and this is what motivates and enthuses. It makes me enthusiastic. It really does.
And you know, and the three of us, we're all very, very lucky to be doing what we absolutely love.
Yeah.
But we didn't get that overnight either. You know, some of the things we talked about, we've made those mistakes.
Oh, God, yeah.
We're all in a position to be able to hopefully help other people through doing something like this, or on a one-to-one support basis, or in a training room, to avoid making those mistakes themselves.
Absolutely. People always say to me, though, that, oh, I'm very lucky to be able to choose. And I actually will go back at people and say, it's not a choice. It's a choice for me to be happy and engaged in my work, because that will mean that I'll be better at doing it.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that people need to take more of they need to invest more time up front to recognise and understand what the role is all about and what the company is all about.
Couldn't agree more.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that level of recognition, and I think what, you know, in terms of some of the top tips and some of the stuff that we've analysed, I think if organisations don't recognise the need to get it right first time, and you know, we go through. I mean, I've done lectures in Swans University with some PhDs about delivering operational excellence and continuous improvement, etc. And when I start analysing and working with managers, and I'm sitting there sometimes observing them, maybe in a board meeting, and I say that because I've had some hoo-has sitting there in a board meeting, and I'm conscious of my body language, like I mentioned you earlier, and I'm doing all of this sort of stuff just to sort of hide what I'm thinking. And one was a meeting of they were talking about recruitment, and they had they just brought a new director on a divisional head in, I can't remember who the divisional head was, department, but it doesn't matter anyway. And we were going through this person had put a meeting, and he said, oh, I've managed and directed big organizations in the past, blah blah blah. So, and I thought, okay, fine, yeah, give the opportunity. I was group ops director for about 6 to 8 months with this company, and I thought, fine, come on board, yeah, you tick the box, you got a good CV. They did the due diligence and all the checks and everything, fine. And then they organised a meeting for 2 hours with 15 points on the agenda for all the directors and divisional heads. And you could just see that, and they asked me my opinion of it, and they got a 2-hour meeting for 15 points. We got 53 minutes, and then we were on point number 3 or point number 4 in the agenda. And I thought, wow. And the chairwoman turned to me and said, how do you think we're doing, Win, in terms of, because I was there analysing and doing a bit of coaching as well as being part of the operational control of the business. And I said, well, I've got to be honest, we haven't got a my slot, and I think my slot was slot 7, 8, 9. And I said, we're on 53 minutes. You've organised this. You told me that your organisational skills and your time management is impeccable. And you've organised this with 53 minutes, and we're on point number 3. I said, let's pull the plug in this, guys. Let's look at a couple of days' time. We get a full day in the diary, so we've all come prepared, because none of you are prepared now.
But
and I got up and walked out.
But we need to be testing that at interview, don't we? And we're not doing that at the first stage, because if you had, or if they, had put something in place to talk about planning and at the right level, everything's got to be at the right level, and also everything that you ask them to do at assessment centres or in recruitment must relate to the job in some way. That's the important thing. That
absolutely.
Then you would have probably quickly established that perhaps planning an organisation, and that might be, that might be something that you're quite happy to do, because he's got the strengths in the other areas outweigh that. But you'll know that, and then you'll get somebody else to do the other things, or you'd know how to do your division of your duties better. And
I was just going to say, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I know we could continue.
We've done it again, haven't we?
We've done this again. To have a good gas.
Let me ask how long we've gone, because we said 20 minutes, and I bet we're probably an hour. We can't be an hour.
No. We're nowhere near an hour, and even though it might have seemed like it for you,
I keep coming back every week for this.
Just to end on some positives. I know, as I say, there are lots of people very sadly being made redundant right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really worried about, how they're going to go about getting their next job. I think it'd be nice to leave on some really positive tips, if you've got them, Tracy, for anybody that's really, looking for the next challenge, the next opportunity, the next role. What would be your top sort of 3 or 4 tips?
I would just say to people, there will be opportunities. There will be a lot of opportunities going forward. But if you're going for interview for any roles with any organisation, the top tip for me is know who I am, know about my organisation, know about my competitors as well, if that's relevant. Those are the kinds of things. Be yourself. Be yourself. I keep reiterating that, and don't try and second guess me as an interviewer what I want.
That's a really good point.
No, I agree with that. That's
It's a really good point. People always say, "Is that what you want? Is that what you wanted?" And it isn't always about that. Do the work, do the legwork. If you can go into an organisation, I know it's difficult, or just have a telephone conversation with an organisation. Somebody who's interviewed, or somebody who works within the organisation, to find out and plan. Plan your responses, but just understand yourself. Understand what's important to you, and what you've got to give an organisation. Because the one thing, and Jackie and I have been talking about CVs, and when I deliver CV workshops all the time, the one thing people struggle with is to tell me what they're good at.
Yeah, and I think that's a human nature thing, isn't there? We very easy to talk about our weaknesses, but we don't like to be seen as bigging ourselves up.
No, that's right.
But if you're not going to big yourself up, nobody else is going to do it for you.
Absolutely. So it's really important. It's really important that you really sit down and think about all those things, all those times when you got pats on the back for doing something really well, or a little email to say, thank you very much for doing that. Your contribution was brilliant, and this is why. This is, all those times where you might have had an award or something like that, or you've done something that, a key achievement in your life, because
something you're really proud of.
Yeah, something you're really, really proud of, because those are the things I want to hear.
What about social media presence, just to get it in there? Because I think we were talking about it the other day, Wayne. Particularly, not just what you're doing on Facebook, but how you're being perceived on LinkedIn as well, as obviously this is going to be posted on LinkedIn. Because I remember going for a job a few years ago, and I had some recommendations on my LinkedIn profile. So I printed them off and I took them along with me. And I said, look, I can talk the talk. I said, but this is what other people have said about me. My manager, well, it turns out to be my manager, because I did get the job, said to me in the interview, you can put those away. I've already checked you out.
And it happens
that
a lot.
going back several years.
Absolutely. I think lots of people do. I think outside of civil service is done quite a lot. Within civil service, not so much. But outside of civil service, I definitely check people that are coming for interview, and they check on me as well.
Yeah.
Guys,
Great process again, isn't it?
I'm loving the top tips, and I think we could continue this conversation going into the stems of tonight. I will probably need some refreshments going into this evening if it continues. But Trace, listen, I think we've had some really good questions, and we've
certainly have
filled them. And like I said, you're right at the beginning of it, the time just flies. We are 35 minutes.
Sorry.
No, please don't.
No. We've done a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure. We will get you back on to give some additional work, and I know Jack and I are working through some CV stuff at the moment with guys online. So guys, I'm going to draw this session to a conclusion. But Trace, thank you for your time. We will speak soon. Well, we do speak regularly anyway because we've made so cool. Jack, as always. And I will catch up with you soon. So everybody, if please, anybody with feedback, anybody with any feedback or anything or any comments about today, please give us a thumbs up or on message Jack or myself. I'm Tracy, obviously, because the three of us are on LinkedIn prominently. So I hope you've enjoyed session 7 of what's occurring, because we haven't lied to you.
He has to get it in there. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.